All your school rugby, all in one place. This is Next Gen 15.
Hi there, welcome to this latest video of RugbyPass. We're Next Gen 15. I'm Angus and this is Tom. We together founded Next Gen 15 back in July, August this year. After last year. 2020, 2021, eh? It's difficult to keep up, isn't it? But we put it together. Myself, Tom, Richard from Cheers Mate Productions, and we brought all of our various brands together. I was 15 Rugby, Tom was Next Gen Rugger, and we've tried to create a bit of a global hub for Schoolboy Rugby. So we're hoping that with these monthly videos for RugbyPass, we're going to be able to branch out a bit more. Before we get started, though, just want to go through some of our ways you can get in touch with us. On Twitter, we're at NextGenXV. Same for Instagram. The website is www.nextgen15.com. That's www.nextgenxv.com. And if you head to YouTube, type in NextGenXV, you will find us there. We've got plenty of videos going up of our own. So do please check them out if you get a chance. So Tom, tell us a bit about the sort of Next Gen Rugger and how we kind of came to join together.
Okay, well, basically, I sort of come from more of an MMA, Muay Thai background. So myself and a friend, Dorian Price, we're going to start sort of an MMA/Muay Thai podcast and all the rest of that. And Dorian had to go over to the States to train one of these UFC fighters. So in the meantime, I looked at the situation, thought to myself, it might be good just to practice with school rugby. Because I just thought nobody's going to watch this, nobody's going to care about it, so I could just practice and work on my video editing and all the rest of that as we go along. And I already had put highlights on from the World Schools Festival just before that, just because it wasn't available anywhere else. And big shout out to John and Sam from Clarinet Sports Marketing for not getting me banned from YouTube for putting that up initially. I think otherwise we wouldn't be here today. But yeah, I basically just used I just came up with a random name, Rugger Bugger. I didn't think anyone would ever be watching it or anything. I was just going to leave the World Schools Festivals games up there. And then, started doing like a few recordings, changed the name to Next Gen Rugger, obviously because Rugger Bugger wasn't conducive to anything, content-wise and all the rest of it. And that's, I sort of saw where this thing could maybe end up and got in touch with Richard from Cheers Mate, who obviously introduced me to you, and from there Next Gen 15 came about. So I mean, why don't you tell everyone how 15 Rugby started, because I don't even know how 15 Rugby started and we're partners.
Yeah, it was a weird one. It was I was a sports writer for a while, and I really wanted to get into rugby, but there weren't a lot of openings in the rugby world, so I thought, why not start something myself? And I wanted it to be a bit unique and something I was passionate about, so I wanted to go back to the school game, where I'd always loved it when I was a part of it, and I'd always thought there was a bit of a gap in terms of coverage here in the UK. So I thought, why not? Let's go and get cracking. Let's start it. Let's see what happens. So I was very much from a written point of view with it. So then meeting up with you and Richard, and obviously Richard in charge of his streaming side, and you being very strong on the video side, it was sort of a perfect marriage of all around the world, but also complementing skill sets to kind of be able to really showcase school rugby properly. Just kind of where it all started with 15 Rugby for me was just trying to showcase school rugby, because I think we both agree that it's some of the most exciting rugby that you can watch around the world. That's for sure.
I think it's quite ironic as well how as soon as we started this magical partnership, rugby just ceased to be, basically. So, it's like it gets cancelled all over the world in terms of the youth game. So we're busy putting content out of our backsides right now, but it's been a challenge. But I think it'll just make the brand stronger. You know what I mean? I mean, we're on RugbyPass right now. We ever thought we'd be here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. People must be desperate for content, eh?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, Angus, just in terms of why do you personally prefer school rugby to senior rugby? I mean, why would you cover that more than anything else?
Joe, I think it's that the school rugby is less structured. It's more pure, I think. And to sort of try and expand on that a little bit, it's that there was an interview recently actually on RugbyPass with Cameron Redpath, who was up at Sedbergh, and he was speaking about how for the first 2 years maybe of being a pro, he was having to learn how to play rugby all over again. Basically, he was having to learn about structures and how, you know, half the game is about pre-planned organisation and where to stand and what to do, etc. And at school, he was just one of the most fantastic talents I've ever seen, and he played just like that as a talent. He just, you know, he just went for it. And I think that's what you see at school level. You just see people being unafraid to have a go. And we're seeing it a little bit that some of the coaches at age group level, sort of England under 18 level over here, they're really trying to coach people to play a bit more heads up and kind of in that schoolboy manner. But it's taking such a long time for it to drip through into the professional world, where, you know, to an extent you get it. People's jobs are on the line. They don't want to risk losing. But school rugby doesn't really have that. It's just got that free passion, and, you know, I think that's just so cool to see. It's sort of rugby as we all like to imagine it.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think, like you said, you know, a lot is on the line for the professionals. I mean, you know, they're basically relying on that paycheck, and if you lose too many games by trying to play rugby that's easy on the eye, ultimately, you know, you lose the job, and obviously it's hard to get back in there. I mean, if you take a look at Eddie Jones, one of the best coaches in the world right now, the game revolves a lot around box kicking. I mean, the Springbok, you know, Springboks basically won the World Cup on that sort of strategy, and you know, all the coaches play according to that sort of structure, like you said, in the strategy, because ultimately that's what wins games. And you know, it doesn't matter to a coach if he wins pretty or he wins ugly. As long as he wins, he wins. Whereas I think in school rugby, you don't have to worry about losing your job, so to speak, as a player. I mean, you might get dropped from the first team or something like that, but you get a lot more freedom to play. And the thing is, what I also think is fantastic about school rugby is that as soon as you get to grade 11, you know that you've got maximum 2 years, right, to play open rugby. So you play your heart out. And that final year when you're in matric, I mean, you've got rivalries that are over 100 years old over there. When you're in your final year as a matric, and you play those rivalries, you know you're never going to get that opportunity again. So, you know, you play with your heart and your sleeve, and you play with passion. Now, there's a lot more passion in the school game than there's in the senior game. I think there's no doubt about that.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think you know, for a lot of guys at school level, that it's sort of often overlooked, is this is probably the best rugby that 80% of those players are ever going to play. You know, not very many people move on and play professional contract. Yeah, this is kind of it for so many people. So I think that adds weight to why we should be covering it as much as possible, because for a lot of people, this is it. This is the best, and I think people deserve to have that sort of highlighted and shown around the world, to be honest.
I completely agree, and I think the thing is we have to accept that we're going to be getting a bit of pushback from the old guard. There's no doubt about it, but just a case of having to push forward and do our thing. To me, it's quite confusing because if you take a look at American sports, that's the gold standard according to how sports is managed and all the rest of it. You take a look at those leagues, I mean, the value of them is incredible. And I think the whole thing with that is basically, you know, college football is a lot bigger than professional football, right? Yep. So, I mean, it shouldn't be unnatural that school rugby could become more popular than pro rugby.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you know, school rugby can be one of the most brilliant watches that you can get. It can be incredibly exciting. There's a huge amount of history there. I mean, there's more history in school rugby than there is in 95% of club rugby, by the very fact that schools have existed longer. Yeah, so there's a lot there, and people remember it. You know, I from my own school rugby days, you know, I remember the games. I remember what happened. You know, I remember getting yellow cards. Yeah, every bit of it you remember, because actually they're big games, they're big rivalries. It's really important at the time. Yeah, and as I say, for those guys that don't go on to any sort of higher honours, it doesn't get better than that. You know, you might still play a bit, knock around for a club, whoever, but you know, if you're just an amateur player, it's never going to be quite the same, because it just doesn't, you know, it simply doesn't mean as much. Unless you're right up at that very top end, and then as we've kind of said, it's a completely different game. But I think we should we've sort of said we'll have a little skirt around what's happening in the world at the moment, just in terms of who is playing, to which the answer is no one.
Yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
But certainly here in the UK and Ireland, Scotland and Wales have basically cancelled their season. Ireland aren't playing any sport at the moment. They have drawn the Leinster Schools Senior Cup and the Munster, Connaughton and Ulster Cups as well, but it looks incredibly unlikely that they'll go ahead, given that that no one's playing any sport. Here in the UK, here in England rather, the season is basically done and dusted. Everything is cancelled.
Yeah.
The sort of chink of light at the end of the tunnel is Rosslyn Park, which, rather than being cancelled for the second year in a row, has been postponed. They're hoping, pending approval, to be able to make that go ahead in the summer, which would be a really interesting idea, because, you know, as we all know, sevens is a summer sport, and yet here in the UK we play sevens from January until March in the snow. So it would be quite nice to at least have a bit of experimentation with actually playing it in the summer at school level, because there's something I've been campaigning for about 3 or 4 years now, that we need to have a look at moving it. Fortunately, circumstance might dictate that they have to, but it'd be really cool if they can manage it, because, you know, it'd be essentially for an entire group of under 18s, it'll be a first and last chance to pull on a first team shirt, which is, you know, sad in one way, but if they can get one chance, that'd be better than what we're all anticipating so far. In terms of Southern Hemisphere, Tom, you're more expert on this than me. I know that Australia and New Zealand are far more open than we are in the UK, and than you are in South Africa at the moment. And I think it looks like they're going to be able to go ahead with some form of season.
I spoke to Herschel from High School Top 200. He says that it looks like at this stage the season in New Zealand will go ahead. Australia is basically COVID-free apparently, so it looks like their season is definitely going to go ahead. Our season is very much up in the air. A lot of tournaments have either cancelled or they're postponed. One of the biggest parts of our season is the Easter Festival. I mean, there's some huge games over there, and you know, unfortunately, a lot of those festivals have been cancelled. So that's very sad. Obviously, I mean, this will be the second year in a row, basically, you know, for a lot of these festivals. And fantastic games. These games are where guys from all over the country can come together and play from different states and provinces and all the rest of it. It's obviously very sad. So looks like training, live training, will be able to resume in February, I think it is, and then contact training apparently 2 weeks after that, subject to government approval. In my personal opinion, and remember this is just a personal opinion, I think it's a 50-50 at this stage whether we have a season or not. It depends on whether we can flatten the curve. Yeah, so my biggest hope is that we basically get, you know, provincial competition. So in other words, schools in the Western Cape can play each other, schools in the Eastern Cape can play each other, and that type of thing. So that's what I'm very, very much hoping for, in the least. Obviously, it's going to be very, very difficult for a school like Grey College, who everyone knows is our #1 school, generally speaking, because they're situated in the Free State and they don't have any competition there really. So they actually have to travel around the whole country. So, you know, these Easter festivals and the Noordstate and Volderklubber festivals, there's an opportunity for Grey to play some of the other schools on neutral territory, for example. So, yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah. But like I say, at the bare minimum, I'm hoping that there could sort of be provincial tournaments.
Yeah, it's a real killer for, you know, everyone around the world that's just not able to sort of have any real certainty over what can and can't be done. You and I have sat for the past 7-8 months thinking, oh, maybe there'll be some games early November, late November. Then we move into perhaps there'll be something in January, and then we move into this. And I think it's hard enough for us trying to talk about it, let alone being a player who's sitting there hoping. And every time you get your hopes up, they get dashed. It's not good. But,
it'll be terrible for this group of youngsters. It'll be terrible for this group of youngsters, especially because, you know, last year's grade 12s at least had a grade 11 season to play. You know what I mean? Yeah. So if the season's completely cancelled this year in South Africa, these guys will have never been able to have a chance to represent their first team. Never even had the chance, and that'll be a real tragedy.
Yeah, so it's highlighted, I think, from the stuff we've been doing recently, the PAX 100 for South Africa, and then the following week, the PAX 100 for England, looking at the top under 18 players in both countries from at present. And the reality is that as under 18s, we've basically not seen them play, and they've not had the chance to play because there has been no under 18 season. So it's been a strange old year, really difficult to really assess people properly, to sort of give a fair reflection of their status. I think we did a pretty good job. Feedback seems to be that most people are vaguely where they should be, but it was certainly a challenge.
Yeah, it was very, very difficult for South Africa. And look, if this season is cancelled, next year's one is going to be next to impossible, because we have a tournament here called Grand Como. It's an under-16 tournament, right? So that was cancelled last year, obviously. So if there's no rugby for this year's grade 11s and there's no Grand Como again, it's literally shooting in the dark in terms of selecting the 100, because you can really see who's going to make the step up at the Grand Como under 16 tournament. You can really get an idea of who's going to be sort of your top 20 or top 30 talents from that tournament, give or take.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's that opportunity to see players and in quite an elite environment, and kind of take a realistic view on who's who and sort of how promising and exciting they are. And almost that opportunity from our perspective has been lost. They're probably more worried about the fact that they can't play, but certainly for us, it's really challenging. But it was certainly quite good fun, sort of almost recalling what's been happening the past couple of years as we put it through, because there's no live footage from this year. Trying to pick together the 100, and then trying to pick out the one I found difficult was trying to select our top 15 from that 100, because for sure that there are about 30 or 40 people that could be in that 15, but also that over the course of this year, had they been playing, those abilities or those 100%. Performances would have varied relative to how they were last year. So it was a sort of point and shoot to an extent, but we seem to have done not too badly. Always picking your top one was easier than picking your top 15, I found.
100%. And I think the thing is that it's little things. I mean, I've got a confession to make right now. It's like you want all the videos to be uniform. So you need an image of the player and you need some stats and all the rest of it. So there's a player from Paul who's lethal. I mean, he's getting the biggest offers in the country now. His name's Coetzee Leroux. I couldn't put him on the 15 list because he doesn't exist on social media. So I couldn't say, hey, are you okay with me putting your picture up? Do you have a picture? Do you have some stats? You want to check with the guys first before you do all this type of thing, and you want to chat with them. But he was nowhere to be found, and I managed to get hold of his agent. His agent says, nope, he doesn't like social media or anything. So what better way just to announce him on the scene than on RugbyPass? You know what I mean? Take that opportunity. So that's an example of a player that I'd love to put on there, but you just can't, for example. But that 15 in general is difficult, and the worst part being South African, I'll tell you that, is that the South African parents are pretty hardcore when it comes to their kids. So I know I'm getting messages after I put out any list. I'm getting messages, I'm getting hate mail, I'm getting called an idiot, I'm getting called all sorts of things. I know it's happening. So the thing is, we're very passionate about our school rugby this side. So it's happening. But generally when you sort of respond and you speak to people, they get that you're just doing the best with the information that you got ultimately, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think by and large, what I found, by the way, actually, if anyone wants to check out the list, do head to NextGen15, where the top 100 is published, and head over to our YouTube, and you'll be able to catch the videos for the top 15s. But I've definitely found, we've had loads of people get in touch. I had an email actually this morning from one of the guys one of the guys' dads from the top 15 list in England. So I've narrowed it down to 15 for people, so it's one of them. But he just wanted to say, thanks so much for sort of remembering his son, because it's been a year without playing. It's almost people expect to be kind of forgotten about. Actually, it was quite a touching story. He only started playing rugby 4 years ago. He'd been a swimmer beforehand. His parents knew nothing about rugby, completely not a rugby family at all. And he got sort of told while he was at swimming one day, I think you'd be really great at rugby. You should come along to training. I think his parents sort of took that one on board, because it didn't mean the 6 o'clock early mornings that swimming means. So they were quite happy to go and do a bit of rugby. But 4 years later, he's in our top 15. He's in the England under 18 squad. think he's captain of his school first 15. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing stuff, and yeah, it's the sort of stories like that sort of make you go, oh, this is really cool. Like we're really connecting with people here.
So what made you to choose Jamie as your number one, Jamie Benson?
So I found it really difficult to narrow it down to one, but the thing that stood out for me with Jamie Benson, is I've seen him play a lot, and he plays older than he is. You see him walk out and you think that's a fly half who's already got his head in professional rugby almost. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's very calm, very composed, but he's got a huge amount of flair to his game as well when he wants it. But it's that level of maturity to sort of know that it's best not always to show your hand every time you get the ball. Your opportunity, it's more about every time you take an opportunity, can you make it count? And he's really, really good at that. Yeah, and there was a nice storyline there as well. The fact that him and Tom Liner have grown up together, playing at rival schools, Hampton and Epsom College, both part of the Harlequins Academy. You know, Tom, as we know, has got a contract down at Queensland Reds when he finishes school. You know, hoping he'll follow in the footsteps of his father Michael and represent Australia. And Jamie has consistently been picked ahead of Tom for the Harlequins team, which I think says a lot, and that's no disrespect to Tom, who obviously is a seriously talented player, and yet Jamie is just getting the nod ahead of him, which I think for me that made a big difference in terms of picking one guy out. But you know, there are 99 other guys on that list that I'm also pretty impressed by, but Jamie certainly over the last couple of years has really stood out. You know, he was playing fly half for Hampton, who are a good side. You know, they're consistently up at the top end. He's been playing fly half for them since he was 15, I think. Yeah, he's running a team like that at that age is seriously impressive. He's a good kid off the field as well. You know, he's head boy at school. You know, he's got his head screwed on, that's for sure. So pretty excited about him. How about you? What made you choose yours?
I mean, again, this is difficult. There's a lot of quality players, of course, but for me, the thing with Luca Ribbons was just that first game I saw against Monument. There was only one game that Paul Boys and Monument played last year, and that was against each other. It was down in the Western Cape. I think it was the Porterville Festival. And, you know, there's a lot of players that impressed me on the field that day. But if you had to take a look before the game, Monument to me had, you know, one of their best teams in recent memory on paper. And they had a forward pack, just absolutely brutal forward pack. Harco Pullman, Jan-Hendrik Bessinger, you know, in the front row, you had Ronan Bouton, you had Ethan Snyman, Dries du Preez. I mean, you can go on, and all big boys and highly physical. So my sort of, what I estimated would happen was that the Monument forward pack would brutalize the Paul Boys forward pack, and then it would just be a case of whether, you know, the Monument backline could nullify the threat of the Paul Boys backline. But Paul Boys really came to the party in that game. They really impressed me. And Luca just stood out really for me because of the way that he controlled the game, especially the line-out calls. He wasn't afraid to, you know, get physical in the game, you know, take on his opposition. And, you know, for grade 11 to make that transition and for your first game from under 16 being against one of the most brutal forward packs in recent memory, and to sort of, you could sort of say the Paul Boys pack came up on top that day. You know what I mean? So for that to happen was just extraordinary for me. And I just think, look, his father was also a great rugby player, very respected in South African rugby circles. So, you know, I think he's got an ideal mentor there to take him forward. And that's why I really think Luca's going to go incredibly far in the game. And he would have definitely been up. Well, he still could be. You don't know if the season's over or not. But, you know, he was definitely be up there in terms of SA school selection. You'd have him as start as an open side flanker, for example. And I think one of his toughest oppositions in terms of the number one prospect will be 8th man this year, Niels Volschenk. So for me, it was between Niels and Luca. And for me, Luca just had that edge because I just saw more of it. I just saw more in that one game of him than I saw from Niels, and that's mainly because Niels didn't play high quality opposition. I mean, I think grade 2 or 3 games, you could call them season warm-up games. I'm not saying the opposition was weak, but certainly not at the level of Monument.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much. And again, it's very hard to judge on one game or a couple of games, So it was a shot in the dark. So this is based on one game and a gut feeling. But I think I really, really think Luke is going to go far in the game.
Well, it seems like we both kind of had a similar approach as well, in that we place a lot of weight on kind of maturity of performance. Yeah, it's the ability as a young kid to sort of play above your age almost.
100%.
Not in terms of the age of everyone else, but in terms of the age that sort of the mental age that you're operating at. And it's a thing that I see quite often as a sort of thread among a lot of the players that do go on to become a success. Is it's not that they're better than everyone else; they are better than everyone else. But it's that their ability to sort of think like an adult rugby player rather than like a schoolboy rugby player that really stands out. I've found it with loads and loads of guys. I mean, Marcus Smith is the obvious example over here of a kid who, as a schoolboy, was operating just at a different level. But it was as much about his maturity of performance as it was about the quality of performance. It's sort of a theme that runs through it, and it sounds like it's exactly the same in terms of the way that you're seeing a lot of the guys in South Africa.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we were saying, do head over to NextGen15 just to check those lists out. We'd love to hear your thoughts. I've already heard plenty. There's this guy in England, George Taylor, who actually was brilliant last year, or 2019-20 season, absolutely brilliant. And he didn't make my top 15 because, as ever with these things, when it's been a year since you've seen someone, sometimes performances fade from memory. And so there's plenty to get stuck into there, and I'm sure there are loads of names that viewers will be able to pick out and tell us that we've been idiots about. Very happy to hear it.
Do you know what the great thing about this game is that based on either of our 100 lists, there's going to be players at the end of the year that we hadn't even thought about that will definitely be on there. Someone that could even be considered a number 1 prospect that we maybe we got that wrong as well. You don't know. That's the beauty of this game, is that
exactly.
Over a season, these guys have got a chance to prove themselves. So there's guys that we haven't even heard of yet that'll probably come to the fore, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for me, and I'm sure the same for you. I'd love it if some kid that neither of us has really heard of just comes through and takes the world by storm. It's almost how it should be. You want to see a kid just come from nowhere and go brilliantly. Another thing that we'd really love to get a few opinions on as well was our top 20 schools in the world. So we ranked the top 20 schools that we could think of based on their performances last year, which meant we didn't include any South African schools because they'd only played 1 or 2 games. So it was a slightly weird list this year, and we named Hamilton Boys from New Zealand as our number 1 team. I obviously haven't seen them play that much. You know a lot more about them than me. So sort of what I remember you arguing the case for them, and I was more than happy to concede. So what was it that made you pick them number 1?
Well, obviously, speaking to Herschel, he gave me sort of an insight into New Zealand schools rugby and how he felt about the ranking system. So basically, look, the thing is that if you take a look at the World Schools Festival, South African supporters point to that to basically state that we're the best in the world when it comes to school rugby, right? Because Grey College beat Christchurch Boys by a significant margin and all the rest of it. But we don't understand the true strength of New Zealand rugby until we have our top teams playing against the Auckland teams and the Super 8 teams. And the way that Hamilton Boys dominated the Super 8 last year was something that you haven't seen in years. So the fact that the Auckland League didn't have a clear winner, because obviously it got cut short because of COVID. But teams that were looking good, there was like Auckland Grammar were looking great there, for example, but they'd lost, which just shows you how competitive that league is. But there was no team that was like head and shoulders above in the Auckland League, whereas in the Super 8 tournament, it was head and shoulders above for me in terms of the results. I was shocked at how well Hamilton Boys did. Also chatting to their coach, Nigel Hotham, and getting his insight into the team. And he just said, look, this is just a very, very special team. And a lot of these guys have been playing in the first team since grade 10. So this is actually their third year together for a number of the players. I think there's 4 or 5 of them that, now I could be wrong, I think there are about 4 or 5 of them that have been playing since grade 10. So 3 years of first team rugby. And it just goes to show you how special the team was. And it's unfortunate that they never got the chance to get a national title, because obviously that was cancelled. But everyone in New Zealand that I've spoken to that knows their school rugby basically says that Hamilton boys would have walked it. So in terms of that, that's why I push quite hard for Hamilton boys. Brisbane boys were also fantastic. I mean, we spoke about them a lot.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, a team like Wellington College in England definitely could have had a look in. But the problem was obviously they had that loss against Sedberg. And then Sedberg unfortunately had that loss against Millfield, right? So in terms of like an out-and-out clear winner, it just looked like Hamilton boys were the best. And again, like what we spoke about earlier, a lot of that's based on guesswork, because we're anticipating what would have happened for the rest of the season. Same as the Irish League, you know, and I mean, we both know how difficult it is with the Irish. I mean, we can't find scores or details or anything like that anywhere.
Yeah,
so
we're
working hard to change that, yeah.
Hopefully we can bring the world a bit more info about Ireland. Yeah. No, I think, you know, from everything we looked at, it looked like Hamilton were the standout candidate, you know. And also it was a bit of a funny one, because we obviously all that rugby had happened before we had partnered. So we were sort of, we'd never had our global thinking caps on at the time it was happening. It was only on reflection that we put them together. So it made for quite an interesting debate. And it's sort of something that we want to get into on our next episode here on RugbyPass, because we think those sort of school rivalries, but global school rivalries rather than sort of national ones, is a really exciting topic, because obviously, yeah, Hamilton boys we rated incredibly highly. Obviously, Grey College, had they been able to play a season, we think would have been fantastic. But you know, while we can be fairly certain of that, it's just speculation when no one gets to play. Yeah, there's in terms of England, there's teams like Hartbury College who are always consistently strong, but then there's the argument: are they a school? Are they because they're an ACE college? Are they an ACE college nowadays? Are they are they more of an academy? And then you look at a Wellington or a Sedberg or something like that. So it's quite tricky. And you move over to Ireland again, and similar things with St Michael's College, who really had not done a lot until 2 or 3 years ago, and then suddenly I think you would probably rate them now as the dominant force in Irish rugby. But then you've got Blackrock College, who are the historic leader. Yeah. Almost, one of the great names in school rugby ever. You go through any Ireland team from the last 30, 40 years, and there's probably 5 or 6 Blackrock old boys in the team. So I think it's a really cool topic, just to work out who are the teams that should be playing each other. If we to put a fictional tournament together, which teams should be there? Because we've never seen it. We've seen the World School Festival, and it's never quite been what we want it to be. Firstly, because not necessarily the right teams get to go, and there's a variety of reasons for that. But also, there's differing age groups. Because of the nature of the way our seasons work in terms of Northern and Southern Hemisphere, it's always 6 months out. So you've never quite got the age groups right. And then, we've seen it with summer tours, English schools going down to South Africa, for instance, and the English schools are sending an under-17 team. The South African side has got an under-18 team. So again, it's not quite what we want to see. We want to see those top schools going head-to-head.
It's a difficult one, because the World Schools Festival was organized for the right reasons, right? It was basically an opportunity for schools from around the world to come together in South Africa, which, I mean, I don't think anyone can argue that South Africa is the home of school rugby in terms of the interest, the crowd sizes, all the rest of that. Yeah. So, I think it was done within the right spirit, but it's very difficult, like you say, to get all the teams, the buy-in from all the teams. Because if you take a look at it, a lot of South African supporters, again, will look at the Hartbury Grey College game. Grey College wins 60-0 and go, well, that's proof South Africa is the best in the world. But what they don't understand is that I think there were 6 or 7 under-18 internationals missing from that team that are playing in the under-18 Six Nations. That makes an incredible difference, to the ability of a team. Also, if you take a look at, I have managed to have a chat with Nigel Hotham from Hamilton Boys. And the big difficulty for them is logistically getting over, and it's very, very time consuming. It's very expensive. There's also the safety factor. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people that was like, sigh when I say that, but it is a concern for a lot of schools in New Zealand and a lot of parents in New Zealand. Is a safety issue in South Africa. Like, whether you agree or disagree, it is a concern, and ultimately the schools have to look after the well-being of the kids, right? So that's another difficult aspect. And I think the most difficult aspect is that if you take a look at let's take a look at your Auckland powerhouses, like let's say St. Kitts, right? They've been fantastic. So if you put out the invitation to St. Kitts, Brisbane Boys, Blackrock College, like 3 great teams like that, and you say come over to South Africa in March or April, basically, if you're from a Blackrock perspective, you're taking a team over and you're probably going to miss 4 or 5 internationals out of that team. From a Brisbane Boys and a Hamilton Boys perspective, you're taking teams over there. If you've got 2 or 3 kids or like that are injured star players, that's your season done. The GPS and the Auckland Championship are tournaments that are over 100 years old. Those are far more important than a festival in South Africa to the schools.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, and it's the 2 of us here just sitting now. We're kind of thinking through all the possibilities that are available. And actually, I think it's one of the weird sort of hidden benefits of the fact that no one's actually playing right now is these kind of almost fictional ideas that we can have of, what's the perfect scenario and who do we want to see play. We can forget all the difficulties of normal life because it's all made up anyway.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that stuff's really cool. And it's definitely something we want to expand on in next month's video. Where we're going to be looking at those international rivalries. It'd be awesome if people get in touch with us and let us know what schools you think sort of should be in those sort of upper echelons that are playing against each other. We might try and put together some sort of fictional group of 8 or 10 or something that we'd love to see playing each other. So definitely fire in any suggestions, and but the 2 of us will certainly have plenty ourselves as well.
A little fantasy tournament, why not?
Exactly.
Anything to give us content during these dark days of no school rugby, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Certainly over in these parts, we've all been picking out Lions 15s for the past 7 months. Anything to keep us busy. So we obviously had Hamilton Boys as our number 1 last year, but give us plenty of suggestions for where you think the teams might have resided in your opinion, and we'd certainly love to hear that.
Yeah, and what we're going to have at the end of this video available for you guys, because I know a lot of you said that Grey College would be the number 1 school in the world if they were playing. So we're going to post a couple of tries up from Grey College's season. They only had a couple of games, like we mentioned. They're all available on DigiTV. So just head over to www.digitv.co.za and you can take a look at the full games of the Grey College season from last year. And we'd just like to take this opportunity to thank DigiTV. They are our media partner. They allow us to use their footage for highlights reels and player reels and all the rest of it. Fantastic partner for us. And again, just thank you to DigiTV for allowing us to use this footage. And we hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think big thank you to RugbyPass as well for allowing us to have a bit of a ramble about schoolboy rugby around the world. And we'll continue to do that every month for the foreseeable future. If you want to get in touch with us, as I said at the start of this, we're on Instagram and Twitter at NextGenXV. Website is www.nextgenxv.com. And of course, our YouTube channel, where you'll find loads and loads of highlights. You'll find those top 15 player videos that we've been talking about. Just type in NextGen15 into YouTube and you'll be off you go. It's been fantastic chatting, Tom, and I'm looking forward to the next few.